Life is hectic, demanding, and doesn't stop. When honest with ourselves, we must confess we often don't know what the hell we're doing. The LARKCAST is an ongoing conversation about the inclusive and mischievous nature of God's presence through the lens of all the things that make up this phenomenon we refer to as life. Astonishing grace and refreshing honesty collide right here for your weekly encouragement.
3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to the LARKCAST. Glad that you're joining us. Hope you've been enjoying our journey through the book of Galatians. That's what we've been doing. We don't always do this on the LARKCAST, but every once in a while we'll pick a book and go through it. This is the second one we've done. We did John, and now we're in Galatians. We're in the start of chapter 3, and it's been a blast so far, man. I've been loving this study.
Yes, I'd agree. It's and it's been cool to see a lot of the feedback that's come in, because I think we were right just in the assumption that, man, this letter might be the most relevant, and I guess you could even say prevalent for our day, I think.
Yeah, especially the conversation we're going to have today. It's one we've had before, but through the lens of the experience of these confused idiots in Galatians. And up until this point, Paul's been, really had some harsh words for those who would confuse them. And, other prominent figures in Christianity in the first century. But now Paul turns his laser beams coming from his eyes and the flames coming from his mouth towards the Galatians. He's not happy with them.
No. And I think, you said, these idiots, and that's an easy phrase to hear sometimes and find yourself a little jolted, right? Like, oh, that's a little harsh, man. Like, let's not go that far. But that's actually the word Paul uses for them in chapter 3, verse 1. Oh, foolish Galatians. Some translations,
foolish Galatians,
exclamation point, right? Like he wrote it that way. And some translations actually read, you idiots. I'm serious. You idiot Galatians. That's what he's saying. So
it's not
like
fitting language for an apostle of the Lord Jesus.
Yeah, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and go on a limb here and say this. I didn't plan to say this, but I'm just going to do it. Because sometimes, you can get pushback in just trying to teach, what the scriptures are actually saying to help people see the God that Jesus is like really revealing. And apparently, like, it is a desperate, it's desperately needed. Okay, because you're talking life and death. You're talking about the difference between living in freedom or living as a slave. Okay, like this really matters, so much so that Jesus has to willfully and willingly die on a cross, a brutal death, man, not to convince God to love us, right? But to prove
a critical point,
man, to show us that he always has. So he submits himself to the hands of what we have created as humans, religion and all of its facets, to justify, right, our enoughness, to prove that we matter, to become these people that we think we're supposed to be and produce the society that we're supposed to be out there. And that's why he's willingly going through this. And sometimes in teaching this and being passionate about it, you can get a lot of pushback from some people, like, well, that seems a little harsh, or is it really that big of a deal? And I'm like, well, have you read the scriptures? Have you seen Jesus's interaction with people who were standing in the way of this? Have you read Galatians and seen what Paul's saying to the people who've been duped, and especially to the people who've been doing the duping? Like, because, somebody was like, well, I can, sometimes you guys can be a little like pointed, in how you're trying to teach this. And it's like, well, yeah, because it matters. It's not out of a place of hatred. It's actually coming from a place, I believe, of like genuine love and hope for humanity, man. Like Paul's not being mean by calling them idiots. He's like lovingly trying to get their attention. No different than Jesus looking at the Pharisees and like calling them whitewashed tombs, children of Satan, you brood of vipers.
Yeah.
Like, bro, that's not exactly
or even
the
using
sweet
the
Jesus
word
of baby lambs and orphans here.
Yeah. Or even going so far as to say those who are peddling a Jesus plus something else is a God, is that message is God damned. It's God damned.
That's what he says.
It's anathema. It's a cursed.
Yep. And I think that should be cause for us as people to press into these things and take a hard look at them in relation to our own stories, but also right to the people that, that are in and around us and the stories that they live. Like, man, seeing Jesus for who he is so that we can see the Father the way he does is the only hope for freedom that humanity has ever or will ever have.
Yep.
It's Jesus or bust.
Yep.
It's free in Jesus or slave. There is no middle ground. And I think that's just, man, it's important to not just know, but also to not shy away from.
Yeah.
And
so we're in chapter 3, and the first verse is, "O foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? It was before your eyes that Jesus Christ was publicly portrayed as crucified." And to your point earlier, they had a vivid depiction, articulation, preaching of the cross as the very crux, as the very axis for life with God. Now, the way that God's revealed, how are we included in this? It's not the ascension of the person as they make their way up to God through deeds, through discipline, through, good historical Judaistic doctrine. It is the cross of Jesus. That is the thing. And again, like you said, God didn't crucify his son to change his mind about us, but to show us his eternal love for the world. And it was public and it was brutal so that we could just something to jar our just foolish thinking that somehow who we are and what we do plays a part in any of this, or that our behavior might move the meter of God's love up or down.
Yeah.
He's loved
I
us
would
with
go
an
as far
eternal
as
love.
saying, sorry, I was just saying, I would even go as far as saying in what you're saying that crucifixion, the jolting aspect of it is to even push us into a place of being able to see where our thinking that we do bring something to the table and that is needed, that's where this actually leads to.
Yeah, it was the thing that led to the cross. It was the Judaizers. It was the Pharisees.
Yeah. You want to see your religion played out? Here it is.
Yeah. Yep.
It'll kill God when he shows up.
But what's interesting is, and now we got a couple good points in this passage, but it was before your eyes Jesus Christ was publicly portrayed as crucified. Guys, you saw the gospel. I preached it to you in a vivid way. You understand this cross. I determined to know nothing among you except the cross of Jesus Christ, Paul says in 1 Corinthians. Like, this is the thing, right? But he asked the question, who's bewitched you? Who's tricked you? And especially coming off of the heels of chapter 2, or the end of chapter 2, where Paul is really addressing the Judaizers who came down and are saying, well, yeah, Jesus is cool, but you really need to add circumcision. You need to add this life of dedication to the law in all of its aspects, because you can't just waltz into, this thing. You have to understand, these guys are saying, man, this is a whole life of dedication to God through the law that makes you more holy. It makes you more sanctified. This is how you really progress. And I know you guys are like all new to this, and yeah, we can concede maybe that you guys could be a part of this. and Jesus has something to do with that. But man, you guys have to come and enter into this life of the law. And so they're following Paul around, and they're watching, just like the Pharisees did with Jesus, they're watching him have meals with tax collectors and sinners. They're watching Paul, right, preach the gospel in Gentile cities and form communities and tables, and where they're eating and sharing and just resting and enjoying their fellowship in this good news and in this grace. And you can't help but think, and we've talked about this in the past, at the heart of a lot of religious hearts and minds, their reason for just being so angry with the message of grace is a little bit of envy. Yeah. Especially in the mind of someone who's worked so hard, right? If you think that it's your behavior that allows you to be here, that allows you to be loved, that brings you to the table, you've arrived because of your list. And all of a sudden you got some hillbilly Gentiles in the city of Galatia, just all of a sudden just claiming like, yeah, I have life with God. I have fellowship with God. And they're not circumcised, and they've never attended any of the feasts or the ceremonies, and they haven't committed to the ceremonial laws and the dietary restrictions, and you know what I'm saying, and tried really, really hard to tithe and, you know, forgive and all these things. You start to get a little envious because you've worked so hard to get here, and what, you're just going to waltz in by faith based on the sufficient finished work of Jesus. And so it's interesting reading Luther's commentary on Galatians. He said that at the root of this word bewitched, this trickery, is this idea of envy.
Yeah.
At the root of that word is envy. And it's like, yeah, dude, you see that. Like there's a lot of envy in the mind of someone who thinks this is a lifelong journey to get there and then maintain this place, right, at the table in life with God, to be loved by him, to maintain that. And all of a sudden we have a whole crew of people that just waltz in and are just talking about like, yeah, it's just simple trust. It's like, what? You know, like that envy boils up and you start arguing and like, no, dude, like it's harder than that.
Yeah. You can even see it kind of play out on the other end as well, with watching people like really come alive in their faith and enter into the faith of Jesus. Sometimes it's odd to me that this thing that we call the Christian faith doesn't look like the faith Christ had. And it's just like, wait a second. So Jesus has this belief about the Father and humanity, and he has stepped into a way of friendship where he's passing on the scandalous news of a God who's met us already where we are. And he's eating and he's drinking and he's hanging out with people and he's laughing and he's crying, and he's never in a rush, and he sort of flows at the pace of the day. And man, this just looks so like restful and joyful. And yet the religion that I've adopted doesn't look like that. It doesn't feel like that. I can remember being, becoming a Christian, stepping into that, and then eventually, getting sucked into this, what's become church basically, and just being enslaved to that machine. And all the while, like looking at Jesus and the Gospels going, he has a freedom to be a friend, to help others live free. It's so simple. It's so beautiful. And it's so adventurous, man. And yet my life is consumed with all of these disciplines and rhythms and systems, and maintaining them and growing them and managing them, all for the glory of God. And I'm looking at this thing and going, well, this is just opposite of everything we actually see in Jesus. It really makes no damn sense at all.
Right.
Why in the world are we doing this? How did we get here? All these things start to come up. Here's my point. I found myself envious of people before I grabbed onto these truths. I found myself envious of people who already had. There was a freedom, man, about their life. And this union that they had with God and helping others live free. And I'm like, I couldn't help but like just take issue with it, man.
Yeah.
I'm over here doing all this stuff, and you're over here actually not only enjoying life, but actually living the life I see Jesus living in the scriptures. Like,
well, take
but you're
it out of
you take it out of
the realm of of this context. I mean, all of us have done this, right? Maybe we came from a family that worked really, really hard. We never got, the Z Cavaricis and the Jordans for Christmas as kids. Now we're definitely showing our age. You know what I'm saying?
That was me, bro. So I'm with you.
And, you're working hard, come from a little bit more of a blue collar, kind of background. And here you have these like trust fund babies or these like really rich kids, and they inherited this life of luxury, just like we've inherited the righteousness of Jesus by faith. And they just waltz in and they got all the swag, all the gear, big smile on their face, all that. And you're just like, damn, dude, like I don't have that, or man, I had to work my ass off for that. And that was just like handed to you. Like that's a very cultural, like very normal cultural expression of what we're talking about here. We've been given an inheritance.
I'm over here some Wranglers and some Voits,
which is like ironically is like cool now.
Cool now, right? But at the time, 7th grade, man, that was rough. Russ, why do you get in so many fights? Why do you keep punching people? Like,
dude, you show up at Voits.
Because I ain't got no Cavaricis, man.
You show up at Regulars and Voits now, dude. You're part of the cool kids. Add a can of Old Style to your hand, dude. You're right there, dude. That's like capital H hipster. Normcore.
So
they call it dadcore or normcore. Yeah, you got the wide leg jeans, like an ugly ass sweater, a freaking dad hat, and some New Balances, dude.
And you're like the cool dude now.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh man, too funny. But yeah, so that envy.
Yeah, it's just there, man. And I think that's, when you read it like that, like, oh, foolish Galatians, right? Who has bewitched you? How did you guys become envious of people who have grabbed on to the same message that you grabbed onto and are now living in the very freedom that you have? But yet, right, you're opting to run back to Moses, right? This is the Israelites, man, right? In the desert. Man, just go back to Egypt. It's a little bit spooky in verse 2. And I love this because Paul like really just presses them here. Let me go ahead and ask you this. He says, did you receive the Spirit by works of the law? Did you guys come alive? Did you awaken to your union with God? Okay, your fellowship with the very Creator himself. Did this happen by you doing things? Right? That's what it means there, works of the law. Did this happen by that or by hearing with faith? Are you so foolish? Are you really this blind? That's what he says. Did you suffer so many things in vain, if indeed it was in vain? Does he who supplies the Spirit to you and works miracles among you do so by the works of the law or by hearing with faith? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, man. I love the point that was brought up to us. He goes past tense in their story, right?
Yes.
Hey, remember all these really cool freaking things that happen, right?
In your verse story? 2, past tense.
Yep. And then he moves to the present tense. In
was it there? Verse 5.
Yeah, verse 5. Does he who supplies the Spirit to you and works miracles among you do so by works of the law or by hearing with faith? So he's like, hey, let me really quick jar your memory on what happened when I was in and among you and we were all enjoying, right, together. Yeah. The simple trust in this God who came down and lived, died, and rose on our behalf for our justification. And then all the freaking cool stuff that God did in and among your community when I was there. Remember that? Remember that in your past? Oh, yeah, by the way, he continues to do that. How? By works of the law?
Yeah. Yeah, such a great point, man.
And I think the
It's
crux
kind
of
of,
it all, of the crux of their message, the Judaizers' message, is right here. Having begun by the Spirit, are you now being perfected by the flesh?
yeah,
And that is the same today in Christianity. It's we begin by faith, but we're sanctified. We grow. We get more and more holy by
right.
pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, by going to all the Bible studies, by signing up for the soup kitchens, by, you know, giving our money, by all, you know, all these things. And those things are not bad at all.
Yeah,
At all. But when they're presented as the pathway to, right, really, truly, right, be progressing in this, or it's the fruit of that, this is really taken root in your life.
mm-hmm.
And we begin, you reference your past story as a pastor, where we begin to see all the programs and the on-ramps and the sign-up sheets and the busyness and the calendar packed out,
Yeah,
absolutely packed out, so that you can actually achieve this. Having begun by the Spirit, you're now being perfected by the flesh. That was the
yeah,
Judaizers' message. Jesus plus.
yeah. Yeah, they had forgotten, I think that's what Paul's showing them in those few verses. They had forgotten that the way you became a Christian is how you mature as a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
The way that you came in is the way that you grow. Okay? It's very simple. It's continuing to hear and believe the scandal of Jesus, your union with God in all aspects of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hearing that, right, back and forth with each other in relation to our actual stories, the things that we're actually struggling with. Okay, not only was that how you awaken to faith, that's how you grow in the faith. That's what he's revealing to him. And I think when you miss the very essence of humanity's need and who Jesus actually is, okay, and what he's done and why he announced it is finished over it, when you miss that core foundation of our very life with God, that's how this Jesus plus comes into the equation. And you brought it up, man. Like for some people, it's like you've got to be able to prove that you actually believe. For some people, it's like, well, we're supposed to become this other thing. Some people have really dragged into Christianity. Well, Christianity, man, is about loving God and loving people, right? Just those two commandments. I'm like, no, dude, no. No, Christianity is not a religion for the wannabe winners who are serious about loving God and loving people. Christianity is a movement of faith among the losers who have given up on their true ability to truly love God and love others.
Mm-hmm.
They have grabbed onto Jesus's faith for their faith, his righteousness for our righteousness. He is our union. So yes, this is how we enter in, but it's also hearing and believing that continuously is how we grow, which I think is why Paul, like right here, man, in verse, what is it? Like verse 6, just as Abraham believed God. For anybody who's new to this conversation, feel free to back up to other episodes or even check this out for yourself. But Abraham, um, yeah, this isn't a poster child for the morality that you want to pursue in life. This is a
No.
very flawed, very frail human
Mm-hmm.
who's made some very foolish decisions.
And he came from a
And
people who used to think that to appease God, they needed to sacrifice children.
yep, he came from a world where not only was that what you needed to do to appease him, but it was doing that in other things that you needed to do to stay in his good grace.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how God chooses this man. And even right here, what does Paul say? It was counted to him for just as Abraham believed God, to trust, faith. That's what Paul's driving home. They've missed that it's faith alone is the journey. And that grace is like gravity that you live in as you learn and continue to learn to trust, to believe. It was counted to him as righteousness. Know then that it is those of faith who are the sons of Abraham, he's telling them. This lineage that you're saying that we're supposed to be a part of, and this law that we need to keep to be a part of that lineage. Think of disciplines, rhythms, all the things that are real popular right now. Yeah. No. But it's just like, no, that's not it at all. In the scriptures, foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, preach the gospel beforehand to Abraham, saying, in you shall all the nations be blessed. So then, Paul says, verse 9, those who are of faith are blessed along with Abraham, the man of faith.
Paul
Bro,
is a
just
freaking
just
gangster, dude.
driving it home, man.
He knows what he's doing, because they're like,
Yeah.
yo, if you want to
Yep.
truly be a follower of God, right? You gotta
Mhm.
you have to truly be Jewish, dude. You got to submit to this law. You got to start doing all this stuff. And he was like, Paul's like, actually, bro, if you want to truly be Jewish, let's go back to the figurehead, the freaking Michael Jordan of Jews, right? In Abraham,
Yeah.
and be like, dude, it's not what you think it is, man. He came in by
Yeah.
way of faith, trusting
Yeah.
a promise that in
Yeah.
you all nations will be blessed through a seed that comes through your line. And that seed is Jesus.
Yeah. We keep forgetting that that God brings a covenant and then fulfills that covenant on our behalf. He doesn't hand us a contract.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a contract, man, we're all screwed, bro. We're done. We're out. This isn't happening.
In
But
fact,
again,
if
in
you
his
what really
grace,
quick, if you want to nerd out, like the covenant he made with Abraham, normally they would like line up animals, but they would split in half. They would take a number of different animals, they would split them in half, they would make a path, and they would both walk through it together to make this contract, to make this covenant, to make this pact. When
that's
God
how
made a
people would do
pact,
that with each other.
yeah, when God made this pact, this covenant with Abraham, he put Abraham to sleep and God walked through it himself.
Mm.
Abraham didn't walk through it. Only God did.
Yeah.
Meaning this whole covenant is dependent on my faithfulness, not your 2-bit faithfulness, your ability to keep up your end of the bargain on this deal. Because as Paul says in the letter of, I think it's 1st or 2nd Timothy, here, let me sum up the entire Christian life. We're faithless, yet he's faithful.
Yeah. Which is why when you back up just a chapter in Galatians where we currently are, right? We're justified by Jesus's faith.
Yes.
Not ours. Our faith, okay, in him is how all of humanity awakens to the union of Jesus, our union with the triune God. That is the beauty of the gospel, man. That is the beauty of this story. One of the places that I found that was really, I felt like was one of the best examples of like what Paul's trying to show us, that you've got to you've got to grab onto the fact that it's death, not, we talked about that last episode. It's death, not determination. Okay, it's trust. It's not toil. The way you came in is the way you grow. It's a life of faith. Anything else that's added to this, it's no longer Christianity. Now you have religion. And people are like, so does that mean like I can't step into caring for my neighbor or giving more to this cause? And it's like, well, of course you can. He's not saying he's not going to bear fruit in you. He's not saying he's not inviting you into the life of God where all those things happen and they're good and beautiful. He's just saying that it's not of you.
Mm-hmm.
And you doing that was never any means of coming in, much less staying in.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my point. When you get to Colossians chapter 1, dude, it's so easy to miss this. I'm just going to read a few verses here. But Paul, same writer here, he says, man, I thank God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, and when we pray for you, since we heard of your faith, not your works, your faith in Jesus Christ, and of the love that you have for all the saints. Now, this is where it gets fun. Because of the hope, he says, right? So there's this beautiful thing happening in and through you by your faith. Because of the hope laid up for you in heaven, of this you have heard before in the word of the truth, the gospel. Okay, that's what Paul's saying to the Galatians. You've missed this gospel, which has come to you, as Paul says, as indeed the whole world, it is bearing fruit and increasing. What's bearing fruit? All this fruit that we're all after and so like concerned about. What's bearing fruit?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the hearing and believing the gospel.
Yeah.
What he says. That's what's bearing fruit, which has come to you and indeed all the world. It is also among you, listen to this, since the day that you heard it and understood the grace of God in truth, just as you learned it from before. Verse 9, and so from this day we heard, we have not ceased to pray for you, asking that you may be filled with all kinds of works for God and for his glory. I'm sorry, it doesn't say that at all. Instead, it says, we have ceased to pray for you, asking that you may be filled with the knowledge of the will. What's the will of God? What does Jesus say the will of God is? John 6, that you believe in the Son.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to read that again, that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will, to believe in the Son, in all spiritual wisdom and understanding. Man, it's right there, dude. And just so we're clear, where does all this flowing out of? This bearing of fruit in every good work, increasing in the knowledge of God and his will.
Mm-hmm.
Again, back to the gospel again. So how did you come in? Well, the same way you grow in the faith, hearing and believing this good news. Because here's the reality, he says in verse 13, I'll end here. This Jesus that we're talking about, yeah, he's already qualified you to share in the inheritance of the saints. He has delivered us from the domain of darkness. Who's delivered us? He has. He has. To the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, not will get redemption, have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. Not I need to be forgiven of sins. I've already been forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
It's finished.
It's finished.
You have been set free to live in the very union of God by way of Jesus. The journey before you is a life of faith. Anything else, and it's no longer Christianity.
The two like popular phrases you'll hear with people who are like really working hard, right, to kind of bear fruit, living this life of toil, and forever just putting their name on 8.5 by 11 like horribly designed printed pieces of paper in the commons of churches all across the land, and packing their calendar absolutely freaking like insane, right, to do all these things that God's invited us into. Is new creature and new life. New creature, we're a new creation, and we have new life in Jesus. They think that that's something to pursue, meaning like that's almost like a finish line. It's like a goal. But new is, if you look at that word, and we looked at this in the Gospel of John, it means beginning. It's a starting point. And you know what makes new creatures and what gives people new life? Being crucified, dying.
Yeah.
And so Jesus died, right? That's the crux of this entire thing. And so grabbing onto that, we die, right?
Mm-hmm.
To embrace a life of faith is to die to a life of hard work, ardent discipline, just a bitter approach where we're just like pursuing all these things, thinking that new life is this goal, this thing I need to maintain. But it's only in hearing the word of the gospel again, because no one drifts towards the gospel. We only drift away. And I need to hear this word afresh. You know what I'm saying? Because left to my own devices, dude, I'm going to slip right back into thinking that I need to become somebody by my own efforts.
Yeah.
And so we hear the word of the gospel afresh, and we died. I'm already in. I'm already free. I don't know why I'm just working so hard to become somebody that God would love when he's already crucified his Son to show me that this ain't it. That ain't it. I've loved you with an eternal love. Sheesh, man.
And if you miss this, is I think why Paul's so adamant here. If you miss this, not only will you turn your life into a project that will ultimately crush you, because you'll never arrive. And the whole thing, here's a secret. It's a myth.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting crushed by a myth. But here's the kicker. You'll also inevitably turn everything and everyone around you into a project for your own justification as well.
Yep.
And so these people that we're saying we love, we actually enslave, we use. I'm just saying it is, I think, again, Paul's adamant here because he's saying your unbelief of this, that it's the faith of Jesus that saved you. And it's your faith that awakens you to the union. And it's believing that you came in, and it's just continuing to believe that you grow. Okay. And then you begin to walk in beautiful things. Amen. But again, it's still centered on a life of faith. If you miss this, then your religion and all the things that you turn to, even in the name of Christianity, might look good, but they are ultimately doing nothing but dismantling your humanity and dismantling the humanity of people around you. Now, why is that so enticing? Where does all of that lead? Dude, there's some beautiful science, man, just on the brain and how it works, and just our adverse, there's almost like an adverse thing within us against this message, because we think, there's this other thing over here that's better. Dude, I'd love to get into that, and I think, we might press into that on the next episode. I don't want to get into all of it now, but I think that's what he's driving home. He's like, if you miss this, it's crushing for you and others. So for everybody who's like watching the news right now, they're like, man, like there's just all this like just chaos and division, and just people's lives, man, just being destroyed left and right, and just all the flawed work that's going on in the name of government on all sides. And I'm just saying, like, you just kind of keep coming with it. The church breakdown, the education breakdown, the healthcare breakdown, blah, blah, blah. Well, when you get down to the root of all of them across the board, you will find people who haven't found rest in what Paul is saying right here in this chapter. In every case. That's why he's so freaking adamant that it's Jesus alone. By faith alone. Stop. Let me rephrase that. It's Jesus's faith alone. That's the scandal. So to that, till next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.